What up, friends? The world is an existential nightmare, and today we're going to be reviewing the newest EP by Saint Motel, the original motion picture soundtrack, Part 2. This is the newest EP by the LA-based indie pop band Saint Motel, and Part 2 of their original motion picture soundtrack trilogy. Like the previous entry released last year, the entire original motion picture soundtrack concept explores kind of the merging of both modern and retro pop influences, with Part 2 focusing more on the modern aspects of it, to some pretty decent results. With the first track Make Me Feel Like, the chilling piano piece is a perfect lead into a dark and pulsating first verse. The nonchalant vocals and ambience are kind of a nice contrast between the lighter and more lonely chorus, especially with that curtain of background vocals hiding behind it. Lonely is actually a pretty good word to describe the lyrics as well, as we're pining for a lover or just someone to make us feel whole. It's definitely a highlight of the EP. Right after that, we get to Slow Dance, which is honestly probably the weakest point of the EP in my opinion. Something about the delivery of the chorus feels a little bit strange and strained. It's kind of unnatural. The overly cheery keys also don't really gel with me very much. I also don't really care for the onomatopoeia that ends the pre-chorus. It feels a little awkward, honestly. Like, there's just no power behind it. There's no drive. I don't really care for this. I do like the funky bass line and the kind of twinkling synths in the background, though. They add a nice flavor to the track. The lyrics are fine, and they have some fun flows and wordplay to them, but again, I feel like there's not much passion in the delivery of these. There's no oomph behind it. I don't get the real joy that we're supposed to be feeling here oftentimes. Next up is Preach, the big single from the EP. That jazzy horn segment combined with the fun keys give almost like this sort of Vegas vibe. I think it's pretty unique and it's definitely fitting for the band. There's another slick bass line on this thing and these buttery smooth verses that transition into the chorus extremely well. I also really like the sort of funky side of indie pop that they got going on with the guitars in this track. It really captures the song's bubbly and bouncy energy. It just sounds like a good time, a party. It's fun. Similarly, the lyrics are also pretty much just about having fun, and I kind of like the sort of subtle soulful touch on the delivery of these. It just adds to the aesthetic and vibe of the song really well. A Good Song Never Dies is actually probably my favorite track on the EP. Adds to the EP's title, this track in particular kind of has that sort of film score styled vibe. It also has a bit of a James Bond-esque edge. I really like it. The samples, background vocals, and that sort of new wave styled bass line give this track a very dramatic touch. It really feels like this sort of legacy track or something like that. Something that wants to be important. AJ's flows here are also very bouncy and lively for a darker toned song. It adds to the song's theatrics, I think. I also really like the lyrics about wanting to find a way to write a hit song that will be talked about for years to come, comparing it to like Beyonce's Lemonade, how that had tons of hits and everybody still talks about Beyonce and all of the incredible feats that she's accomplished. I like that sort of contemplating a legacy in the lyrics. I think it's a pretty interesting topic to cover. The Moment is a pretty somber end for the EP with these very chilling keys and emotion-filled string segments. I also really like how they cut the instruments back a little bit and let the vocals breathe during the verses. It makes the build-up and impact of the chorus that much more powerful because of it. The acoustic guitar elements that are added a bit later in the track also add this sort of delicate touch to the song that really enhance the mood and make the emotions kind of swell even more in the background. The lyrics are also pretty heartful as AJ is feeling a bit lost in a certain situation as he's feels like he's tried everything and that everything has failed. And I think it's also an interesting topic to touch how living in the moment can make you unprepared for the future, which might be how AJ ended up getting into this situation that he's talking about. Overall, this is another very solid entry in Saint Motel's catalog. However, I do feel that Part 1 does overshadow this one a bit. The instrumentation in the previous EP, Part 1, felt much more lush overall, and the modern pop influences on this one, while they didn't hinder the EP that much, they also didn't really help it that much either. Weirdly enough, I also don't think AJ's vocal performances were as strong on this EP compared to part 1. Some of them are just a bit awkward here and there, and weirdly enough, sometimes they just don't sound like they have enough passion for what they're talking about, or at least they're not matching the tone and energy of what they're talking about. However, the lyrics themselves, I think, were pretty good, and they covered some pretty interesting topics. I also think that the varied instrumental styles are still here, and they are still welcome. I like how they're, again, trying to play with both modern and retro pop, finding different ways to combine them. I think they're still doing a pretty decent job on that front overall. In conclusion, I am feeling a strong 7 on the original motion picture soundtrack Part 2 by Saint Motel. Of course, we still have to talk about the album cover here, and the album cover is fairly similar to Part 1, as this is a trilogy. They're going for, making everything cohesive, which I appreciate. I do like the color scheme on this one. That sort of muted red works very well. I like how it's sort of styled like an old film poster or like a theater ticket of sorts. The handwritten track names on the side are very nice. It's just a very bold, kind of pop art inspired cover. It's right up my alley, so of course I like it. But that is what I think about this album, EP, whatever you want to call it. What did you guys think about it? Did you like this one just as much as Part 1? Did you like Part 1 a little bit more? Or are you looking forward to Part 3, whatever that's going to bring? Because I have no idea what that's going to bring. Let me know. And until the next one, farewell.